science fiction and fantasy enthusiasts, and welcome to our podcast. With Ryan Sean O'Reilly, David Wilkinson, and Richard Mell. You're listening to No Deodorant in Outer Space. Now, let's get started.
The human mind is a strange and wonderful thing, he said reflectively, but I'm not sure it will ever figure itself out. Everything else, maybe, from subatomic particles to the universe, except itself. Good morning, good evening, good afternoon, and welcome to another edition of No Deodorant in Outer Space. My name is Ryan Sean O'Reilly, and I am joined, once more, by my podalicious cohorts, Richard Mell.
Howdy, everybody.
And David Wilkinson.
Hey, this is so much better than Game of Thrones. Let's go.
Is it? That's a good question. Maybe we should start off the show with that. Roundtable. Lightning round. Is podcasting
I don't know what's going on.
No Deodorant better than Game of Thrones?
Care. I have HBO Go, but I can understand like the anticipation and kind of crap. And it's going to be ruined
Ryan
for Will
has my,
because he's on the internet and can see like everyone's reactions to the.
You're not. How am I on the internet and you're not? How am I different than you in that aspect?
Because
my crazy friend Wilk's online all the time.
I toggle between the Huffington Post, which I know will have like a Game of Thrones blurb, which I will just fucking flat ignore. Well, it's hard to ignore that because the titles of these columns are pretty succinct, but I'll just try to ignore that stuff.
Well, you know me. I'm always on the internet, so yeah, I can't avoid it. What the hell are you talking about?
I've got like two websites I visit. I visit the Blackhawks website and Huffington Post, and that's it.
I feel like there's probably more sites that we're not. You're skipping here.
There are some, yeah.
You've sent me links. Yeah. Okay, so just a little update. Ryan gives me a call last night or text so he can watch a boxing match, which is the most bizarre phone call I've had with Ryan in 20-some years. It is bizarre. So, of all the things Ryan would call me about on a Saturday night, he's like, I'm at a bar. I came here to watch boxing, but there's no boxing. And I thought, this is like some bit for pod people. I'm like, who took over Ryan? I mean, can you imagine Ryan O'Reilly calling you up to get information about a sporting event that he desperately needs to watch right now? I don't know who the fuck he is.
Yeah, well, he has definitely been persuaded by a third party.
Absolutely. I'm like, well, this is going to get me in the mood for the podcast. I mean, yeah. Podcast, pod people, it's all coming together right now. Shit. And Prince died in an elevator, and if you look at that song, he used, like, the Afterlife song, he uses the phrase, don't let the elevator get you down or bring you down. That's kind of messed up, too, when you think about it.
Yeah, I think it was a kind of like a concerted assassination, and, it was timed just right between the dates of April 19th and May 1st. It's like the time of assassinations for people of the kind of satanic religion, and this is what happens to celebrities this time of year. People just get kind of picked off, and he was one. I mean, I remember seeing an interview with Prince. He was talking about chemtrails, okay? That's kind of like what gave him away.
Satanic religion? What satanic religion are we talking about?
Rick, just no one talk except Rick for the next hour. Rick, just go on. I just want to hear this.
Have you guys heard of the Illuminati? The Illuminati
Yes.
did it. Okay, they assassinated him, and it was because Prince has always been outspoken for all kinds of kind of like popular things, and like Newports are poisonous because they're marketed toward black people, and chemtrails largely exist over black neighborhoods. I don't know how they can kind of pinpoint chemtrails, but
Prince did, evidently.
It's basically all a matter of population control. Population stability is what they would call it. And, they pick and choose who they want to live long lives and who they don't want to live long lives. So who gets the brunt of this? Well, people that are low on the socioeconomic scale. And unfortunately,
Prince.
That kind of ends up with Prince's people. And he had the balls to speak out about it, and he got assassinated. So there you go. I'm awaiting my assassination next year because I just kind of came out and said it.
Do you want me to delete this part of the podcast?
There's still time.
Ryan, they're listening to us right now, right, Rick?
They are. We are broadcasting.
Yeah,
so our ratings doesn't seem to show that.
Well, the Illuminati they don't exist in the normal measures. Our ratings are going up, though, which I assume is we're getting the Illuminati audience, which is
an
big.
important demographic. It's an important demographic for us.
It's neglected by other podcasts, but so Prince was murdered by the Illuminati, which are they now? Is that your way of saying Jewish or what? What's what are they?
No, I mean there are Jews in the Illuminati, but I mean it's like a lot of
it's diverse. It's a diverse group,
covert groups. It's a very diverse aggregate, and it's just it's elite people. You got to have money, you got to have influence to be.
Do you have to be circumcised?
Not necessarily.
Or are there like any? So we got some very European people here with the foreskin.
Well, I mean, the old monarchs of Europe, they're not dead. They're still tracking their, family, tree, and they still think they're entitled to special, groups and opinions, and they kind of keep it under wraps, but they still operate, and they live amongst us.
And they take out pop stars from Minnesota. So,
well, in order to be in the entertainment business, you kind of sell out to them because they control the entertainment business.
Jews or Illuminati? So I feel like we're talking about Jews again.
No, it's a large portion of Jews, but I mean, some Jews are in the entertainment business, but they're not a part of this covert group. I'm not discriminating. It's just, Jews are intelligent people. They have influence. Of course, they're part of this, but they're only a part of it. I
feel like we're a breath away from saying international bankers at this point.
Well, I mean, they exist among the bankers too. The IMF, for example.
Who did 9/11?
Who did 9/11?
Yeah, who's responsible?
I don't know. I mean, I can't just assume it was what the 9/11 Commission told us all.
There's a lot of talk about the Saudis this week. That. Yeah. Well, I guess the Saudis are threatening to do ban imports if we release the rest of the story, so to speak. Okay, well, good. We're off track. Let's get back to pod people, which may or may not be Ryan, based upon that phone call last night. And
was it boxing or was it Ultimate Fighting, Ryan? Was that boxing or was it Ultimate Fighting?
We went to go look for boxing, and instead there was Ultimate Fighting. I asked the bar if they had the fight on, and they said yes, but they put on Ultimate Fighting.
Was it the Bronze Eagle?
You've already lost me.
Was it the Bronze Eagle on Ogden Avenue?
The bar?
Yeah.
No.
Okay, well then you don't have to disclose it. Okay, be careful what you say.
Oh, after what you just said, I'm definitely going to be careful what I'm going to say. So this episode, if I can actually get around to it, is going to be about the book Invasion of the Body Snatchers, which came out in 1955 and was written by Jack Finney. There are a number of film adaptations. Primarily, we're going to be covering Invasion of the Body Snatchers, the film that came out in 1956, directed by Don Siegel, which starred Kevin McCarthy. Then there was a later remake in 1978, directed by Philip Kaufman, which starred Donald Sutherland. And there's a couple other versions we might get into if we have time at the end. But those are what we're going to primarily focus on. So...
Well, to be fair, I've been thinking about this a lot. There really are only 2 movie versions of this book. The rest are just variations on a theme. They have nothing to do with this actual book. It's like saying that the Blade movies were based upon Dracula. They're about vampires, but but they're not based upon Dracula.
Demolition Man.
And again, no, I'm just saying.
Right, well, let me just cut you off there because you're really wasting a lot of time. Let's get into that when we get to the movies. And then let's just go into our opening comments. I'll start with you,
When you
Rick.
say waste time,
Rick,
I feel like you're
opening
implying
comment.
that we're doing something valuable with our time right now.
My opening comment for the book, Invasion of the Body Snatchers, was snatch-tastic.
By the way, our backup recording system is not working. Rick, Wilk, let's go to you. What do you have for your opening comment after that spicy little nugget?
Honestly, God, I just changed my opening comment because I want to use the phrase snatch-tastic too. It was snatch-tastic. The book itself is a good 1950s serial novel that kind of meanders and runs out of steam at the end, but it's got a very good concept that's been popularized throughout modern media, fiction, film, radio. Since then, it's a good read.
And I guess I'll tack onto that saying this book it's got interesting concepts that provide creepy fun for the whole pod to enjoy. So that's my little opening comment. Not as salacious as Mr. Mel. However,
the whole pod.
We're all pod people, Rick. Don't you realize that yet? Should be now.
It's not like there's one collective pod. I mean,
is there? It's not? Are you sure?
A few of them to influence communities and the world.
Well, this was written by Jack Finney. Mr. Wilkinson,
Yes, sir.
give us a little background on Mr. Finney.
Well, Jack Finney's a very interesting fellow in the sense that he did not think he was that interesting, and he wanted his work to speak for him exclusively. He tried to keep his life very private, so trying to find stuff on him outside of the normal scope of things was kind of hard, but I did find
Illuminati.
almost a non-published... Yeah, well, no. I mean, he was born in Illinois, and he lived not too far from where you blokes live, I think in Forest Park.
Galesburg.
Is that,
Yeah, Forest Park, but he went to school in Galesburg. Knox College.
Well, no,
He actually was born. He was actually born in Milwaukee,
Oh, yeah, Milwaukee.
Yeah, we've all read that in Wikipedia.
but then
I've
he came
done a
down
lot-
to Galesburg.
But again, guys, some of the information in Wikipedia is very inaccurate. I actually went to the library and I got a microfiche autobiography on him that was never published called A Life Kept Hidden. And I've got lots of good stuff here that you don't know about.
You were on one of those microfiche machines?
Yeah. And I've got the PDFs here.
You operated a microfiche machine?
No, they got microfiche stuff there.
That's some hardcore research.
Yeah, it is.
That's awesome.
You went to the
although he was born in
microfiche level on
Milwaukee,
this?
Yeah.
All right.
All right. Jack's dad died when he was 2 years old, and his mother quickly moved back to a Chicago suburb of Forest Park to live with her parents. She married again to a guy named Frank Berry, who worked for the railroads and the telephone company. His mother, now Mrs. Berry, was a seamstress, a woodworker, but she never worked outside the house. She always worked inside the house. And it was a very intensely private experience. She had another daughter that is maybe still alive today. She was last time living in Alaska in 2002. Jack lived in Galesburg, I think, for a while, but again, he went to high school, that's Forest Park, that sort of thing, and then he went to go to the Knox College, as you said. He graduated from high school in 1929 during the Great Depression. That's when he went to college. I couldn't find if he was ever in the military, but he was involved in the ROTC at Knox College, and there are records of that right there, but I can't find anything about him enlisting. But again, he had multiple names. He could have been under a Berry or things like that. He may have, the name Jack Finney wasn't his given name. It was a nickname, and there are rumors that his name was actually was actually Berry, and he used it to hide some of his other, activities, military history, that sort of thing. But there's really no public record of Jack Finney serving in the military, even though he was in the ROTC. He was also an avid swimmer. He was on the swim team, and he wrote for the school paper at Knox College, and he married his college sweetheart, who he divorced about 8 years later, which is very scandalous. Doesn't talk about it. Can't find her. Don't know if they had kids. And he ended up remarrying in the late 1940s, and he had one daughter and a few other kids down the road. He worked as in advertising for a while, and he was writing short stories on the side, which began to take off in the 40s. And the book that we're discussing was really his first published novel, I believe, but not his first published work.
But it originally came out in serialized format, right? I think in Collier's magazine. I think it was serialized when it first came out.
Okay. But he had written as a novel, then it was published in that magazine. It was his first published novel, and he had other short stories that were standalones. I think the first is called The Widow's Walk, that was published in 1947. And the editor's page in Collier's had a photograph of Finney on a fake postage stamp, and here's what he said about himself in the bio for his big novel. Because again, he was a very private guy. Here's what he told them to write. I'm from Forest Park, Illinois, Knox College bred, and wedded to a gal that you'd like to meet. She likes everything I write, including the singing commercials that I once wrote for the radio. That was it. That's all I want to know about him. That's all he said about himself. Okay. So again, I mean, he's very private. His name probably wasn't Finney, and he was very adamant through his agent saying he wanted his work to speak for himself. And the work that we're reading really isn't his most famous book. He was a huge fan of Richard Matheson, who we've discussed in the podcast before.
Right.
And he actually
we covered
I Am Legend.
Yeah, exactly.
Yep, and he actually did some illustrations for him. He would mail him pictures occasionally, and he wrote an excerpt for him on a biography about Richard Matheson, which kind of came up too. But there was rumors they were friends. They would correspond, and but again, those are just rumors. This was a very private individual, and there's just so to find information on him really took some digging. But Google has put everything onto PDFs and microfiche, so the stuff doesn't show up in Google searches, but you can go to the actual Google Scholar and find a lot of this, or the library. And again, he had a lot of short stories that were published. His most famous book, his most well-known book was Time After Time.
Time and Again.
Time and Again.
And then he wrote a sequel right before his death to it.
A sequel, yeah, which is kind of like the last guy who wrote, the Rosemary's Baby guy, who wrote a sequel to
Ira Levin, yeah.
Rosemary's Baby. Yeah, so And he wrote plays, he wrote radio commercials, but again, very private. He's got some grandkids and children that are still alive, possibly a sister. But again, he wanted his work to speak for himself, as I've said 3 or 4 times. And here we are. And I get the impression he wasn't that proud of the Body Snatchers. It really was his first book. And again, I think the ending was very sloppy. The writing was decent, but here we are. And I think it's had a pretty profound influence on a lot of things. I would say this is his most famous book, but what do I know?
Well, I know he got a lot of recognition for Time and Again, which was he explored time travel, and my understanding is that the method of time travel in that book was kind of different because they used self-hypnosis or something. But that book was well respected because he wrote a lot about historical stuff that was going on in New York, that like buildings and stuff that aren't there anymore, and it was praised, I think, for its description at the time. And like you mentioned, he worked at a New York ad agency, and I think the protagonist did in Time and Again. So I think that might be his most well-received book. Yeah. And, he wrote The Body Snatchers based on, I think he said it in Mill Valley, California, and that's where he lived in California. So he also used his own setting for that book.
What got him out to Mill Valley, California? Does anyone know?
No,
or is that like under wraps too?
No, I mean, I have no idea. He's...
I think the guy was just a true blue propagandist. And rule number 1 of a propagandist, you can never admit that you're a propagandist.
What are the other rules? Like, don't feed him after midnight, don't get him wet?
I mean, he actually was. I mean, he was a professional propagandist on Madison Avenue, New York City, when he was looking for an advertising
that's not propaganda, that's advertising. That's 2 different things.
Are you kidding me? It's the same.
Propaganda is actually defined as like more or less advertising correlated to a government interest. I mean, that's propaganda. Selling a product's not propaganda. Similar methods, but like propaganda has an actual meaning, and it's usually tied to a government agenda.
I mean, you're still cultivating interest in something. He's cultivating interest to promote some product from a corporation.
Advertising, but propaganda is done again for a government interest. Yeah, but propaganda is done to like basically promote a government point of view or a policy standpoint, not to sell soap. I mean,
it's still promotion. It's still subversive persuasion, basically.
It's advertising.
Well, let's do this then. You're bringing up an interesting point, Rick, and why don't we just get right into the book then? Because I think Wilk has wrapped up his bio. And Rick, why don't you give us a quick synopsis of the book, and then we can get onto your point about propaganda in this book.
Quick synopsis of the book. Who's the main character? I forget.
Dr. Miles Bennell, I believe, right?
Miles, yeah.
Yeah.
So Miles is a general practitioner in a small town, and a couple of his patients are coming to him and all wide-eyed and telling him that their family members are just different, and they can't really explain it, but they can just tell that they're different people, and they're freaking out. And he kind of blows him off until his big crush comes to him and says the same thing to him. And then, bells start ringing, and then he goes out and he investigates. And, it's basically, he's the pod people in this book are not exactly, just, you can't really tell outright. It's very nuanced, and you really don't know unless you know these people personally. Anyway, the pod people precipitate in this small town to the point where Miles and his girlfriend and a couple of close friends are the only ones left, and they know what's going down based on all of their findings, and they're actually being led astray by a pod person whom they trusted from the get-go, and whom they've had to kind of divorce their philosophies from over the length of the book. And it ends up where they basically kind of save the town and save the nation.
Well, and I guess what we were getting into there before we talked about the book synopsis was you were talking about propaganda. And this book has been, I think more around the time when the movie came out, maybe than when the book came out. Although the movie was, the first movie was, I guess,
a year afterwards. So it was pretty close.
After, so it was pretty close. So, but the people have put on a allegorical lens over the story and claim that the story is about communism or McCarthyism.
Well, I mean,
kind of
Ryan, what kind of people have said this?
Well, I mean, I read an NPR article I shared with all you guys. It's been said. I mean, a lot of people, a lot of articles.
Yeah, people have examined this book and said it's an allegory for communism or McCarthyism or going on the strength of the individual versus, I guess, the collectivism. So, I mean...
Ayn Rand even, Ayn Rand enthusiasts like this book too. I mean, it really, a lot of people draw a lot of water from this well.
And Wilk, you were saying, off
including
air,
the
previously, Wilk, you were saying that the author has denied this. Do you want to...
Yeah, well, the author, in a short excerpt in an article published on National Public Radio's website, and in a little snippet there, just said, "Yeah, people. I mean, I wrote this book to make money, and that's about it. There's no deeper meaning to it."
God, really?
And I mean, I think our friend Rick disagrees with that. But again, if you look at this, whether he's lying or telling the truth, this story has inspired so many different takes. It's an interesting metaphor. And now learning more about him since I read that article, here's a guy who lost his father during his formative years, literally like when he was 2 or 3. And then a year later, there's a new man sleeping next to his mom. That to me is inspiration of a pod person, replacing people, things like that. Mm-hmm. Divorce, new people filling in your roles. It doesn't have to be as sinister as him being a communist. If you look at his entire body of work, this is a very thoughtful, sympathetic person who cared about his family and the arts, and he has an attention to detail that Ryan probably enjoys, where he recreated the 1880s of New York just for fun in a novel. I mean, it doesn't strike me as a guy who had an agenda. And again,
I can understand that. Yeah.
And people that do have agendas usually are more outspoken, like your Ayn Rands or even your George Orwells, people like that who have something to say. They'll say it and they'll beat it over your head. I really just think this is a good sci-fi horror story. I mean, you can find analogies in anything. Frankenstein is full of them. Dracula's full of them. The Mummy, whatever. But like you can use it to say anything.
Well, I guess there's a difference maybe between allegory and metaphor, right? Allegory is more of an intentional writing where you're disguising something to prove to say a point, whereas metaphor is more. You don't have that kind of agenda, but there can be different loose interpretations. But I guess, Rick, let's go to you then. And what's your thought on this? Did you feel that there was some kind of allegory on communism or McCarthyism or something like that in this story?
Well, the book that I purchased sets it up perfectly right from the foreword. It was written by Dean Koontz, and you can't really publish a book with a foreword like that without just sort of completely commissioning it. Okay, and the publisher commissions Dean Koontz to write this kind of drivel about fascism and communism and how they're bad, and he blasts environmentalists saying that they have agendas where certain people shouldn't exist. Dean Koontz is like paraphrasing what these environmentalists are saying, and I mean he's strictly coming at this from a right-wing angle. I can understand that a publisher, just being a publisher, wants to give this like a right-wing angle. Well, but Dean Koontz, this is the foreword of the actual story that Jack Finney writes.
But Dean Koontz is the best-selling author, though. I mean, a publisher might want Dean Koontz to be on there because people might buy the book. They don't care if it's right-wing or left-wing. I mean, he's a very famous author.
Well, I mean, it depends on how they want to draw off of this well, right? I mean, obviously the publisher is steering people into this direction. Whether or not it's Jack Finney's intention, I think... just given Jack Finney's history, okay, there's not a lot about him. He likes to keep things under wraps. And what we know about him is that he was involved with the military. He was an advertising agent.
Maybe.
Was it?
Maybe. He was an ROTC. There's no military record for him.
You know what
you also
means, right?
You bring up another interesting point.
Yeah, but it's
point
not
or
the
question
military,
does the author have the last say on how their work should be interpreted, or after it's written, is it just open to the world and it doesn't really matter what the author says? How does that fit in?
Well, I think both matter. I mean, intent matters, but like, I mean, you can look at a photograph and draw meaning from it. You can look at a book and draw meaning from it, but an allegory, an intentional allegory, does fall on the author. I mean, his intent does speak to something. I mean, and again, I don't think he had any intent here to educate or uneducate us about something.
Did you guys pick up on any anecdotes in the story that suggested that this was about communists taking over a capitalist society in the 50s? Did you guys catch anything like that?
No,
I did not.
I mean, I wouldn't expect you to, Ryan. But I mean, Wilk, what about
you? Why would Ryan?
What is that?
No. I really did it. It just struck me as like drive-in movie type stuff in a book. It was a pretty cool book. It was a pretty cool the guy had a great concept here for pod people, one that has become insanely popular. I mean, even one of the books we read this year, Stepford Wives, is kind of based on this book, this concept of replacing people with false people. I mean, it's a very interesting concept, and this is maybe the first time it's been done in literature. It's a very original idea. I mean,
okay. I mean, Rick, you did tell me early on your thoughts about that, and you pointed out the Dean Koontz thing, and I was still reading the book at the time, and I remember when I was reading it, not feeling that I saw anything about that in the book, and I continued to read the book. And when I finally finished it, yeah, I know, but I'm telling you, when I finally finished it, I didn't walk away with it thinking, well, this is really an allegory, or really did it touch on communism at all. What I did come away from it thinking is, and I think other reviewers have noted, is that there is maybe some, although I think that Finney might have actually denied this as well, but there is something in there about individualism versus collectivism in the sense that the pod people are kind of all mindless in their lack of emotion, and they take over the humans, and that's kind of the fearful element in the book, and the characters seem to be striving against that, because even though the pod people, like you said, that Dr. Manny Kaufman, I think his name was, who was a psychologist who's trying to convince them, hey, just become a pod person, you're going to be the same person, it doesn't even hurt. But then they're like, and the people look like the same person, right? They physically look like the same person. They even have the same memories. And in the beginning of the book, you can't even tell. You can't even.
Well, but Rick, I can see the exact opposite though. To me, it's a fight, like Ryan said, for individualism, fighting against the rising tide of conformity that was in the 1950s, fighting against McCarthyism. I mean, you can look at it from both ways, because
McCarthy was in the establishment. I mean, he was a senator, right? And he had other senators with him. Okay. And what he did was, it was tremendous. He kicked people out of Hollywood. He kicked people out of the arts successfully. Okay. He
didn't. He didn't do that. He had hearings. Well, Rick, he also found communists, though, too. There was actually communists that they found and got out of the government. There was executions. There was agents. There was a communist infiltration in the government and in society. The blacklist wasn't anything done by the Senate. That was just done by Hollywood, because, God bless them, they loved the boys in blue, and they were going to be patriotic.
Oh, yeah.
But I mean, let's not get too focused on McCarthyism. More going back
from the story, okay?
Going back to the book,
He underscores certain principles that are correlated very closely with capitalism, and this is ambition and emotion and excitement. And, these play against the stereotypes of communists. In the States,
aliens are replacing people's bodies. How are they not going to get excited about that and are emotional?
Wait, hold on a second. The replacement of bodies, I mean, that's just sort of like the mechanism he uses.
Yes, it is.
And that's completely.
But it replaces their emotional.
Okay, we're talking about these allegories. Now, I believe they are
alleged allegories.
I believe they are allegories. Okay, because he is underscoring these principles, and he's also quoting Winston Churchill, who fought like a dog against fascism and communism.
Right, is generally loved around the world for that.
What's that?
And is generally loved around the world for that. It was one of our greatest allies in this time period. Winston Churchill was very well loved during that time, and he was actually fighting against, Nazis, Japanese people who were intent on just destroying nations. I mean, they weren't the offensive part in that war. I mean, he's not a fascist.
No, I'm not saying that Churchill is a fascist. Okay, but he did. I don't know if he fought directly against communism. I mean, I don't know what kind of hand he had with limiting communist Russia's influence with Western Europe, that dividing line between East and West. But I'm sure he helped to, limit communist influence. Anyway.
Well, so what? I mean, the quotes he gave weren't, he's a good guy. What's wrong with quoting him?
Well, I don't believe he is a good guy. Winston Churchill was a great leader, right? He successfully stopped, the Nazis. He stopped Stalin. He did what he was supposed to do. But the ways and the means that he took to do it were just completely fucking atrocious. All right.
Okay, so Rick, what is your point about him quoting Churchill in the book? So he quotes Churchill, and you feel like that is more evidence of
why he's a propagandist. I mean, why would you go out your way to quote a guy who is like a leader of the quote unquote free world, right?
What was the quote, and how was it used in the book?
How was it used in the book, and what was the? Oh, geez.
Yeah. Well, I mean, that would really answer that question.
It was the quote, we will fight them in the streets, we'll fight them on the shores, we'll just kick their asses.
Yeah.
Okay.
Doesn't that seem pretty relevant to what's going on in the book? They're being attacked by an alien race.
The timing of that is perfect, because at this time, when the book was published, it was 1955, and McCarthyism is a deal going on, and they are having hearings, and this thing gets published. And
no, but this book comes out in 50, and
well before that. That was in the 60s.
Mm.
When was the book published?
1954, I believe.
I thought it was 55.
The movie was 55?
Yeah.
Hold on. I know I said it at the beginning of the show.
Anyway, I mean, there was still there was a red scare at this time. Okay. And it, look, what Churchill says in that quote, we is basically, we will fight them. Okay. Not we will understand them or we will have peace with them no matter what. He said, we're going to try to obliterate these people. And
okay, so how does that relate to the book? How does that relate to the book? How does it relate to the book?
Well,
but this is your worldview, Rick. This is your worldview.
Well, you're
putting your worldview onto the book. Just read the book at face value.
I'm putting my counter view with the popular perspective of what the book is.
There's no popular perspective. This is a book that's
you even said yourself. I mean, this thing is popular with followers of Ayn Rand, right?
I said people who like Ayn Rand have liked this book, as have people like you and people like me and people like Ryan. People extrapolate a lot of meaning from this book.
Yeah, sure.
But they're all finding their own crazy meaning here. I mean, using a Winston Churchill quote about fighting people when you're fighting an alien race trying to destroy the Earth seems pretty goddamn relevant, especially in 1954. Let me change gears and kind of let me change gears and kind of spin off, and we're kind of going in circles. I think at this point, I think this is one of the debates about this book: is it an allegory or metaphor? And I think Wilk, you found this article / podcast on NPR by Maureen Corrigan called "The Sad Lessons of Body Snatchers: People Change." And I think one of the points in her article, and I guess you can add on to this if you want, Wilk, was that the story of the pod people and the various movie iterations that have come to existence after the book, she talks about us as people physically becoming pod people as we get older and we become infirm and we become elderly and we end up in nursing homes. And she talks about how that is probably one of the elements that strikes a chord with people, and why this book has remained fascinating and interesting to people is that we can relate. There is a fear in all of us, whether you want to talk about communism or McCarthyism, there's a fear of us losing ourselves and just becoming shells and hollow, and what makes a person. And I think that was a very great point that she brought up in her article, and might go to the staying power of this book and how it's sort of remained
she's talking about
to be relevant.
Becoming older, right? Older people are voting for their own interests, or
no, just becoming older and losing your mind as you get older. Alzheimer's, diseases like that, and sure. you end up in a nursing home, and that is probably one of the reasons why this book is so popular.
You're a stranger to your own family. You're a stranger to your own wife. Yeah, right.
You're a stranger to yourself. Yeah,
that's the beauty of it, and that's why it's art. You can spin it any way you want. Okay, but there's a predominant spin.
Okay.
The predominant spin is that these pod people, they're all the same. They don't have any ambition, and they might as well just be damn communists. And let's fight the hell out of them and kill them all.
Well, okay, backing up, I was wrong about McCarthy. It was in the 50s, so you're absolutely right. It was during the McCarthy era. But again, I mean,
the timing is there.
Yeah, I guess. I mean, but again, every decade this movie's been out has extrapolated its own meaning to it. I mean, from urban sprawl to sexuality to...
I agree. You can spin it any way you want. I'm just saying the predominant spin is a predominant spin. And it is what it is.
Well, what you just said does not make sense to me. And I'm saying that in a nice way because if you can spin it any way you want and it is what it is, those seem to be in conflict.
That seems to be more of a metaphor and less of an allegory.
No, it all depends on what Jack Finney's intent was, and we don't know his intent. Obviously, he's a professional liar. He's an advertiser. He writes stories. He tells stories for a fucking.
We know that he said
every writer's a professional liar. Then okay, they all tell stories. They get paid to tell stories. They're professional liars. Okay, but do you feel this is a little bit insane? Like, okay, why you think he's what is he propagating? What is his message here? Is anti-communist, pro-communist? I mean, to me, it seems, I don't know.
Is he pro-pod people, con-pod people?
I mean, I've already alluded to it. He's completely anti-communist.
Don't allude, just say it because he
is anti-communist. That is what his allegory is all about.
Okay,
that is my theory. Okay.
And you're pro-communist.
Sure, yeah, I'm more communist than I am capitalist, for damn sure.
But how is this propaganda?
How is this propaganda?
Well, I think, guys, I think we've regurgitated that over. Guys, you've went over that over and over again. You said your point. Wilkinson said his point. I think you're just saying the same thing over and over again.
It's making out these communists to be pod people. All right, something extremely despicable.
What are the pod people? What are the pod people? Are the McCarthyites who are all conforming and marching in line doing things? I mean, McCarthy seems a lot more mindless than communism to me. Communism is a pretty well thought out, well organized thing, which requires individual thoughts working together.
Very well organized, yes.
So wouldn't McCarthyism be the one when people are just mindlessly joining the herd and saying McCarthyism would usually point at somebody and scream, just like the fucking pod people do. It's like it's much more pro-communism
like I said
than
before,
anti-communism.
He underscores ambition as being something of complete value. Okay, I don't believe ambition. Yeah, of course, ambition is of some value. You need to learn in life. You need to, proceed with your life. You need to get better every day. Okay, that's ambitious. Okay, but what he's saying about these pod people is that they have got. There's no excitement there. There's like nothing there. These people are completely their brains have been washed, and they are just operating for one reason only, and that is to basically spread their germ across the entire world and take it
when
over.
the pod people argue that that's what humans do, they take over resources and exhaust planets.
That's how communism was described back then too. I mean, for forever we were trying to stop communism. Okay.
All right. Well, we're not debating communism here. Let's move on from this point. What did you think about the characters? You're talking about ambition and stuff like that. Did you feel like the characters in this book? I guess there's probably 4 main characters. You got Miles and I guess his love interest Becky Driscoll, and then you've got the writer and his wife Jack and Teddy Belichick. They're the main characters. You have the psychologist Manny Kaufman, who is a friend, and then he turns into a pod person without them realizing it, and sort of, I guess, becomes an enemy by default. And there's various other peoples, but those are the main 4 characters. Did you feel that those characters had agency? Do you feel like that they used their abilities to move the plot forward? I saw some criticisms online from various reviewers that these characters, the main character is a doctor, and they're saying like when he gets these pods, why doesn't he go and take it to a lab and like X-ray it and like do tests? Like he doesn't do any of that.
Well, yeah, he's probably part of like some kind of medical society, right? And that is agency in itself. And he also suggests that he call up his buddy who is a lieutenant colonel in D.C. That's agency.
He does do that. Yeah, he does do that.
So
he's worried that people won't believe him.
Relying on the American capitalist military to fix the problem. He also made the comment that while Miles was observing the pod people, he was saying, oh my God, all of these people are pod people because they're all acting like they're shopping, but they're not really shopping. They're just going through the motions. Shopping is closely related to capitalism, right?
I know you. So, so did you feel that the characters
thing, right?
Did you feel like the characters were realistic?
Yeah, I thought so. I thought.
What about you, Wilk? Did you feel like characters were realistic and believable?
Yeah, they were fine.
So you felt...
I don't think we've ever talked about characters in the show before. Yeah, they're goddamn characters. Yeah, I mean the stories
about characters on the show before.
Not like this. Well, realistic. Yeah, they were fine. I mean the stories about pod people.
One of the criticisms I saw was that they didn't feel like the plot had some holes.
How did you feel about it?
I think the characters do kind of just go along. They kind of plot along.
Yeah, almost the most interesting thing in the story is pod people from space replacing them. That's the story. The characters are secondary. He was writing this in a hurry.
Well, that's I guess the point.
Yeah.
Yes, I guess the point. The characters are kind of weak then.
Right. It's like a 1950s serial novel. It's like we've read these before. Like it's all about the story and the action, not about the fucking characters. Who cares for the characters? They're just I mean that's I
guess that's the point.
Right. Okay.
Miles is a good character because he's not perfect. I mean, he's not like he has his urges in life, and he has his laziness. It seems he's real person, and it's well thought out, and he's a fleshed out guy.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. How'd you guys feel? How'd you feel about the ending, Wilk?
Which one? Oh, in the book.
There's the book. So the book, the way the book ends is the podkeep people just get frustrated because, gosh darn it, mankind just fights too hard.
Farts too hard?
They might do that too.
I kind of feel it. Well, the ending's sound cheesy, but I feel the same way too. I just want to go upstairs and watch Game of Thrones right now in this podcast. But I mean, like the guy was in a hurry and he wanted to end it, and that's how I feel right now. I'm in a hurry and I want to end this. And I'm looking at the clock. Let's wrap it up, do the movie, and end it. Yeah, they didn't do
That's
anything
not quite
special.
moving it along.
Well, it is, because look, the ending was stupid. It was just like, okay, you guys are just too tough for us. We're gonna go somewhere else and take over that planet. Sorry about all the killing and all the potting.
It's kind of a cop out. He didn't have the time to think it through.
I wonder if that was. I wonder if it's because of the serial nature of it. If that was something that.
So it was a serial.
I thought that it was originally a serialized.
It was originally a serial that got published as a novel.
Yeah.
So that's all.
Okay.
Which was more common back then.
As was the style at the time.
As was the style at the times. All right, well then why don't we just do our final comments and star rating? So then I'll just say,
you guys don't want to talk about any of the metafiction going on in that book? I mean, that's what kind of like gave it some deeper meanings.
As long as you don't relate it back to communism again.
No, I'm not.
Okay.
But there were a few anecdotes in this story. One was the reference to, and a lot of these are actual accounts in history. One was the Dancing Death. They were trying to figure out what the hell was going on in this little community, and the psychiatrist that Miles was talking to was giving him all these excuses, like, some people just go through this mass hysteria. They talk to each other and they make each other freak out. And look what happened back in the medieval times when a bunch of people were found dancing. And more people just kind of joined in, and they danced themselves to such an exhaustion that they just dropped dead. That was kind of labeled mass hysteria by the psychiatrist, which I don't really believe. I mean, there was a lot of things that people just didn't understand back then. There was a lot of, bad rye going on, if you get my drift. So people were eating stuff that might have been spoiled or something like that, but he called it mass hysteria, which, kind of gives this whole allegory thing kind of like a new facet. So there was mass hysteria. There was the tale of the mad gasser, and that's an actual account of, of something that happened in was it Macon, Illinois, or it was Mattoon?
It was in Illinois.
It was Mattoon, Illinois.
Yeah.
But that was an actual story. I think it took place back in the early 20th century, and it was about basically the local law enforcement just couldn't put their finger on this thing, and a lot of people just thought that there was a criminal out there, and he was just gassing people while they were sleeping in their homes, and just another case of mass hysteria. But there were other theories involved with that. The theories were, there was industrial waste. That's one. The other theory was, so this book deliberately kind of adds these different theories to kind of confuse his allegory, or his alleged allegory. Okay. To just kind of like make you think about, is this a piece of propaganda or not? According to Jack Finney, of course it wasn't. But he's paid to say that. That's his profession. But the book does go deeper with a lot of these anecdotes. And there's a story about the shoe shiner, and it's a story of hypocrisy. The shoe shiner is kind of face to face when he's doing his job. He's extremely earnest with his job, and he kisses everybody's butt. But then an observer saw the shoe shiner say how this shit is just
it was the main character,
and,
wasn't it?
And he was just like mocking his whole profession because he hates kissing people's butts, okay, and shining their shoes.
Does that go to the larger story at hand about how you have the pod people putting on a face to fit in, and and that's in society, we all put on faces to fit in.
It's twofold, I think, and one's explicitly intentional, and that's basically to point out these pod people as if they're making conscious efforts trying to fit in. So they're being hypocritical. And that's what the explicit angle is. The implicit angle is that the character himself, Miles, is a hypocrite himself. And you just kind of have to, read more into that character to see some of the hypocrisies that he demonstrates. We're not going to have time to get into that much, but this book has multiple dimensions to it. It makes you really kind of think, and it's not just a sci-fi gimmick. I think there's more to it, and that's why the book is pretty nifty, and it's a classic.
It's got a strong concept that leads to a lot of discussion and thoughts.
Yeah.
I think like a lot of the older books we've read that have stuck around, I think that is one of the reasons why they stuck around, is they came up with this really interesting concept, and like Wilk said, the characters are weak, but the concept is interesting, and there's enough meat in there to really make this kind of last the test of time.
Yeah, and it has. Yeah.
All right, well then, let's give our final thoughts and wrap it up then. So, Wilk, why don't you give your final thoughts on the book and your star rating?
3 stars.
What's that?
3 stars.
Okay. Rick?
I'm going to give this book 3.5, 4 stars.
Okay. And I'll give the book 3 stars. So on that, I will invite everyone to join us later this month when we cover the 2 movie remakes, the first 2 movie remakes of this book, and get in discussion about that, and invite everyone to go onto iTunes, rate our podcast. We appreciate that. Subscribe. You can also get our podcast on YouTube, TuneIn Radio, Stitcher. We're also now on Google Play Music, I believe it is. So you can get us anywhere that you can find podcasts just about. And we appreciate that. Visit our website, nodeodorant.com. And with that, I will just say good night. Good night, everyone.
Good night.
Oh, good night. Yeah.
For more information on the topics discussed in this episode, or to read our show notes and find us on social media, visit nodeodorant.com. For more information on Ryan Sean O'Reilly and his various works of fiction, visit ryanseanoreilly.com. For more information on David Wilkinson, visit drycracker.com. For more information on Richard Mell, check out his profile at goodreads.com. The theme music for this podcast was written by John Doyle from the band I Decline. You can visit him at i-decline.com. Voiceover for this podcast was provided by me, Margaret O'Reilly. Well, that concludes our episode. We hope you've learned a lot. Again, thanks for listening to our show. And always, always remember, there is no deodorant in outer space.
I'm recording. All right, let's do this shit. What? What's up? What's wrong? I hate you.
Go.
All right, in 5. Everything. Except itself. Sorry, I messed it up. Let me do it one more time. One more time. The human mind is a
Deep breath, Ryan. Come on.
Rick, waiting on you.
Okay. All right. Let me try and search for this.
We're only 3 years into this.
Yeah, well, yeah. Holy shit, I'm getting some feedback here. I'm hearing my own voice.
I think Will took his headphones off or something.
Okay, he's gone. Anyway,
Wilk, do you have anything else to add?
I'm watching Game of Thrones.
You are still